Good afternoon, everybody. I hope y'all are having a wonderful day. Here we are once again for our Wednesday Word. We are finishing up the Bible study from Dr. Jeremiah and on Luke. We will be starting a brand new study next week, so I hope you can join us. Let's go ahead and get into these last two chapters. Okay, this is lesson 12 from this book, Crucifixion and Resurrection. We're going to be looking at Luke 23 and 24. Getting started. When was a time you were accused of something you didn't do? How did you respond? Something to think about. To be honest, for me, it's good afternoon, Miss Teresa. Welcome, welcome. I have a problem. I'm thinking of trying to think of something, but I really can't. I mean, pretty much if I was accused of doing something, I did it, or I'm just not remembering what it is, and that's okay too. So let's get the stage set here. Now, when Jesus came out of the grave on the first Easter morning, he came into the world that was troubled. It was a world where the Jewish people had long been under the heel of Roman domination, a yoke they sought desperately to throw off. Jesus came into the world where 5 million people, conservatively, were slaves with cruel masters. He came into a world where the infant mortality rate was very high, and many children dying before the age of 6. Plague swept unchecked throughout the world. Taxation was a tremendous burden. People who lived during that time were men and women who wept and worried. Among them were the friends of Jesus. After his crucifixion, the followers who had watched him perform miracles were in shock. 2 men were sorrowful as they walked on the road to Emmaus. 11 of his disciples were confused and disillusioned as they gathered behind closed doors to wonder and to wait. No one knew what would happen next. Mary Magdalene and the other women who came to minister to the Lord were overwhelmed with sorrow and hopelessness. They were bringing spices to anoint the dead body of their anticipated Messiah because they believed it was all over for him and for them. They loved him with a great love and wanted to honor him even in his death. Jesus had told them of his resurrection, but they had not believed him or understood him. The angels at the tomb had to remind the woman of Jesus' words. This is how it was on the first Easter morning. Love was alive in the hearts of these women who came to minister to Jesus, but faith and hope lay crushed within his grave. Exploring the text. Good afternoon, Miss Lisa. Welcome, welcome. Before Pilate and Herod. Now the whole multitude of them had arose and led him to Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king." Then Pilate asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered him and said, "It is as you say." So Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no fault in this man." But there were more fierce, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning with Galilee into this place." When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked if the man were a Galilean. As soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, so was also in Jerusalem at that time. Now when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him and had hoped to see some miracles done by him. Then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. Then Herod, with his men of war, treated him with contempt and mocked him, arraying him in gorgeous robe, and sent him back to Pilate. That very day Pilate and Herod became friends with each other, for previously there had been enmity with each other. Then Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, said to them, "You have brought this man to me as one who misleads the people, and indeed have examined him in your presence. I found no fault in him concerning those things which you accuse him of. Neither, no, neither did Herod, for I sent you back to him, and indeed nothing deserving of death has been done by him. Therefore I will chastise him and release him, for it was necessary for him to release one of them at the feast." They all cried out as one, saying, "Away with this man, and release Barabbas to us, who had thrown into prison for a certain rebellion made in the city and for murder." Pilate, therefore, wishing to release Jesus, again called out to them, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." Then he said to them the third time, "Why, what evil has he done? I have found no reason for death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go." But they were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And the voices of these men and the chief priests prevailed. So Pilate gave sentence that is to be as they requested. He released to them the one they requested for from rebellion and murder and had been thrown into prison, but he delivered Jesus to their will. Question number 1. What tactics did Pilate employ to try to avoid the responsibility of sentencing Jesus to death? Oh, just a minute. Okay. He sent him to Herod. And continued and said more than twice that he found nothing wrong with him. He found nothing to sentence him to death. Nothing to sentence Jesus to death. Question 2. What do you think Pilate eventually relented and agreed to free the criminal Barabbas instead of Jesus? Because they wouldn't listen. They were so much hatred for Jesus that all they wanted was his death. It just like overruled him. And they wouldn't take no for an answer. Okay. The king on the cross, Luke 23:26 through 46. Now as they led him away, they laid hold of a certain man, Simon, a Cretan, who was coming from the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. This is true, Teresa. They were afraid of God because he admitted that being God's son. They didn't like that. I think they hated him too. They hated him and were afraid of him at the same time. Simon the seeker. Okay. And a great multitude of people followed him, and women who also mourned and lamented him. But Jesus, turning to them, said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For indeed the days are coming in which they will say, Blessed are the barren, wombs that never bore, and breasts which never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things, then the great in the green wood, what will be done in the dry? There were also two other criminals led with him to be put to death. And when they came to the place called Calvary, they were crucified. There they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And they divided his garments and cast lots. And the people stood looking on. Even the rulers with him sneered, saying, He saved others, let him save himself. He is the Christ, the chosen one of God. The soldiers also mocked him, coming and offered him sour wine, and saying, If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. And an inscription also was written over him in the letters of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. This is King of the Jews. One of the criminals who were hanged blasphemed him, saying, If you are the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, Assuredly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. Now it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. Then, and when Jesus had cried out with a loud voice, he said, Father, unto your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. Question number 3. How was Jesus' crucifixion made even more agonizing by the people who witnessed it? They continued to taunt him. Continuing taunting and jeering and wanting to know why, if he was the Son of God, he couldn't, do something about what was going on. Yes, and they did try to give him vinegar to drink. So let's see. Here we go. Okay, Lisa. Thank you for coming. One of the criminals hanging next to Jesus recognized that he had done nothing wrong. What did this criminal recognize about his own condition, and how did Jesus respond to him? Let's see. The criminal recognized his own sin. His own sin. And the knowledge that Jesus was not I don't want to put that. That Jesus had done nothing wrong. And how did Jesus respond to him? You said that today you will be with me in paradise. Okay. Jesus is risen. We're looking at Luke 24, 1 through 27. Now on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they and certain other women with them came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. But they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. Then they went in and did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. And it happened as they were greatly perplexed at this, that behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. Then, as they were afraid and bowed to their faces to the earth, they said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he spoke to you when he was still in Galilee, saying, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the third day rise again. And they remembered his words, and then they returned from the tomb and told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. And it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them, who told these things to the apostles. And their words seemed to them like idle tales. They did not believe them. But Peter arose and ran to the tomb. Stooping down, he saw the he saw the linen cloth laying by themselves, and he departed, marveling to himself what had happened. And behold, two men were traveling at that same day to a village called Emmaus, as there were which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they talked together of all the things which had happened. So it was that they conversed and reasoned that Jesus himself had drawn near and went with them, but their eyes were restrained so that they did not know him. And he said to them, what kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad? Then one who was named Claudius answered, saying, are you the only stranger in Jerusalem, and have not known the things which have happened in these days? And he said, what things? So they said to him, the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who is the prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. We were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, because all this today is the third day since things happened. Yes. And certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us. When they did not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. And a certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but he they did not see. And he said to them, O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them all the scriptures and things concerning himself. Question number 5. How did the disciples react to the woman's news that Jesus had risen from the dead? They didn't believe him. Didn't believe him. Question number 6. How did Jesus respond to the two men traveling on the road to Emmaus, who were trying to come to grips with his death? He explained, all the scriptures about himself to them. Now Jesus appears to the disciples. Then they drew near the village where they were going, and he indicated that he would go no further, that he would have gone further, but they constrained him, saying, "Abide with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent." And he went and stayed with them. Now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, that he took bread, blessed, and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened, they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to one another, "Did our hearts not burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened the scriptures to us?" So they rose up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." And they told about the things that had happened on the road, and how he had known them in the breaking, how he was known to them in the breaking of bread. Now, as they were saying these things, Jesus himself stood in the midst, of them, and saying to them, "Peace be with you." But they were terrified and frightened, and supposed they were seeing a spirit. And he said to them, "Why are you troubled? Why do doubts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see. For a spirit does not have flesh and bone, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. But while they still didn't believe for joy and marveled, he said to them, "Have you any food here?" So he gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb, and he took it and ate it in their presence. Then he said to them, "These are the words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, and all the things must be fulfilled which are written in the laws of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms concerning me." And he opened their understanding, that they might comprehend the scriptures. Then he said to them, "Thus it is written that thus it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and rise from the dead on the third day, and that repentance and remission of sins should be preached in his name to all nations, beginning in Jerusalem. And you are witnesses to these things." Now we're on question 7. What impact did Jesus' words have on the two men, excuse me? His words, what kind of impact did his words have on them? They knew who he was. At the breaking of the bread, their eyes were open. Question 8. What did Jesus do to calm the disciples of their fear? He blessed them. He showed them his hands and feet. And ate with them. Okay, let's review the story. There was nothing fair or just about Jesus' trial and execution. He was innocent not only to all the charges leveled against him, but also to any wrongdoing whatsoever. He was blameless. The darkness that fell while Jesus was hanging on the cross ultimately served to silence those who had accused and taunted him. For a centurion who witnessed his death spoke the truth when he said, "Certainly this is the righteous man," which is in Luke 23:47. But Jesus' death on the cross was not the end of the story. A group of female followers were the first ones to discover that Jesus had risen from the dead. And then the astonishing news spread when Jesus opened the eyes of two men on the road to Emmaus. Then the astounding news spread to the rest of his disciples as well. Then he appeared to them in the flesh and shared a meal with them. Question now: what conclusion did Pilate and Herod both reach after they heard the charges against Jesus? They both saw no reason to crucify him. How did Jesus demonstrate his love for people of Israel, even as he is being led away to the cross? It's in Luke 23:27 through 34. I'm going to read that because I am befuddled. Luke 23:27. A little too far. 27 to 34. Okay. A great multitude of people followed him, and a woman who was also mourning laminated him. But Jesus, turning to them, saying, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children." Let's see. He demonstrated his love for the people of Israel even as he was being led away for the cross. He told them not to weep for him. For indeed there are coming days when they were said, "Blessed are the barren, the wombs that never bore, or the breasts that never nursed." Then they began to say to the mountains, "Fall on us, and onto the hills, cover us." For they do these things in the greenwood, what will they do to the dry? Then there are two other criminals. I think that's as far as I go. I am pretty sure. Let me make sure. Little way to the cross. He told them about what was to come. Was to come. And he said, "Father, forgive them." Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Question 11. Get Luke 14, 9 through 12, and John 20, 24 through 29. How is Peter's reaction to the news of Jesus' resurrection similar and different from Thomas's reaction? Now, I am not going to go to John 20 because I know that we all know this. That John was didn't not believe. He wasn't questioning it. He was shocked. John was let me speak. Peter's reaction was more of a shock and enjoyment. Thomas's was just no unbelief, total unbelief. Unless he saw him, touched him, he wasn't going to believe. He was more the physical. He needed to have a physical knowledge of it, where where the rest of the disciples didn't need that. Let me get this written down in some way, shape, or form. Let's see. Peter believed by word and deed. Thomas questioned until he was able to see, hear, and touch him. Oh my God. John, question 12. What did Jesus say to help his disciples understand the events of the previous 3 days? Let's see, 44 and 48. Now that it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the earth, the sun had darkened, and the veil of the temple had been torn too. And then Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. So the question is, why did Jesus say to help his disciple understand the events of the previous 3 days? He gave up his life to go to the Father. And he committed himself to him. Committed himself to the Father. Okay. Question 13, applying the message. The criminal who hung next to Jesus received salvation when he called out to Christ. What does this tell you about God's grace and how God responds to those who trust him? Jesus said to him that he would see him in paradise that day. they would see him in paradise. And the criminal knew he had done no wrong. Okay, question 14. Jesus opened the two disciples' eyes on the road to Itness and revealed how he was the Messiah promised in the scripture. How has Jesus opened your eyes to this fact as well? Like at the beginning, how has Jesus opened my eyes as to who he is? That's hard to explain. That's something I'll have to think about to be able to put it into words. Down on paper, it's very hard for me to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue going with reflecting on the meaning. The resurrection of Jesus changed the world. More importantly, it changed lives. It changed lives. The women at the tomb were changed. They came to Jesus' burial site downcast and forlorn. They raced back excitedly to tell the others that they had found. The 11 disciples who had been cowering in a room became bold and fearless. They would end up risking their very lives to preach the gospel because the resurrection had changed everything for them. When people come to know the risen Christ, it transforms the world in which they live. When a plague broke out in 2000 AD 250, killing as many as 5,000 people each day in the city of Rome, the Christians stayed behind to attend to the sick while the others fled. The news about Christians spread, and a few decades later, in AD 306, the Emperor Constantine came to power and declared religious tolerance for Christians throughout the Roman Empire. Christians were later instrumental in getting the popular but crucial gladiator contest banned in Rome. The resurrection of Jesus Christ continues to change the lives of those who are exposed to it. Given the proper consideration, it can become the most exciting event in a person's life. The resurrection of Jesus is the essence of hope, for the power with which Jesus conquered the grave is available to all who believe in him. This power blurs the lines between what is possible and what is impossible. Thus, the resurrection of Jesus is hope for the drug addict, the person dominated by alcohol. It is for the troubled marriage and the person filled with hate. It is hope for the person struggling with physical, emotional, or mental health. It is hope for the grieved parent, spouse, child, and friend. Jesus Christ, the resurrected Lord, is hope. And just as he changed the lives of the people in that terrible world when Easter first dawned, he continues to change the lives of people today. What area in your life do you most need the hope of Jesus' resurrection? And that is going to be our journaling response today. And again, I will, as normal, keep that to myself and get back to that. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here and for walking this journey of Luke's Gospel with me. I appreciate it a lot. I hope you have gotten as much out of it as I have. Next week, we'll be getting John. Again, another series by Dr. Jeremiah. And I hope y'all are able to make it. Till then, I'll see you next week. Bye now.